Please go ahead, Bill.
Well, thank you, Roshan. And if you could take us through the practitioner's guide to setting up teams and channels in Microsoft Teams, appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill. Like I mentioned, my name is Roshan Rameshan. I'm a program manager on the Teams side. My team drives teams and channels, the creation lifecycle management of the teams and channels experience in Microsoft Teams. So in this session, what I'm going to do is, cover practical tips and guidance that we have learned talking through customers, from product design, from research, etc., in terms of, and then from our actual experience in Microsoft Teams using the product in terms of how you can create, manage teams and channels for your organization. And this is more of a, kind of like the art and science of creating and managing teams and channels. There is no single size fits all solution that works for all organizations, but I hope all of you walk away with some useful information in terms of how you can start thinking about and planning adoption and creation management of teams and channels within your organizations. And looking forward to your feedback and questions as we go through the session. Let me start off with a few basic definitions and setting context so that we are all on the same page as we go through the topics. So let's talk about teams and channels, right? So at the broad level, a team is a collection of people, content, and tools that facilitate collaboration, right? Currently, you can add up to 2,500 members to a single team. We are working on increasing that limit to 5,000 in this calendar year. A team defines membership, visibility, permissions, and policies. So that is the unit of control when it comes to membership, visibility. Like, for example, if you take the files associated with the team, that's where the permissions and policies can be applied. Teams is actually built on the Office 365 modern groups, and that is the unit of governance, and the changes made to groups will actually sync down to teams and vice versa. For example, if you add a member to Office 365 group, that will reflect in Teams or the other way around. A channel is what we call a collaboration space within a team, where you can actually get work done, and you can even create channels for fun. Channels by default are visible and open to anyone in the team to participate in. So all the team members get to see all of the channels. They don't essentially have to participate in every single one of them. And we will talk more about best practices for channels and teams. A channel can be extended with apps. We will talk more about that as well. You can create up to 200 lifetime channels per Teams is a limit. We recently doubled. It was 100 earlier. And what I mean by lifetime channels is, if you delete a channel, that currently counts towards the total channel limit as well. So you can have a total of up to 200 of channels associated with the team.
I'm sending this one out that way too.
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
All right, please continue.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. All right. So let's talk about origins for teams, right? So there are various different ways you can create a team. One is, you can just create the team from scratch. Like you go to Teams, say create a team, create or join a team, and then create a team. And you can add members, via typing their email address, their username, or adding a DL. At which point, when you add a distribution list, it essentially expands the distribution list and adds the members of the distribution list to the team. I'll just call out that it does not currently embed the distribution list as a part of the membership. It actually expands and brings the members over, up to 2,500 of them. You can create a team using another team as a template. So this is an easy way to kind of take a more cookie cutter approach to creating teams, especially if you're setting up, let's say, a certain type of teams over and over again. So you can actually set up a team initially and then use that as a template for creating a second team. And as you do that, you get an option for what kind of channel configurations, app configs, etc., what all to bring forth into the new team. You can create a team from an existing Office 365 group. Let's say the collaboration started in groups, maybe in Outlook or in email originally, and you want to bring that over and switch the collaboration over to Teams. You can do that as well. So when you create a team, you can choose to create that from an existing group. You can also create teams via API graph APIs or commandlets, and these are powerful in terms of how you can build that out. Like for example, using APIs, you can programmatically create teams that whose membership, for example, are reflected based on the address book attributes or similar, or business processes. You can create line of business tools that actually create teams programmatically that tailors to your specific organizational needs. So broadly, go ahead.
The question there, can a user create a team from another team, or that has to be made from the management console?
A user can, this is a functionality that we are, I believe we are just launching. So a user can create, assuming that the user has permission, like, if the user can be a team owner, they can create from another team, but the other teams that they get to see are teams that they are owners of.
Okay, maybe it hasn't launched yet because I haven't seen that. Okay.
Right.
Thanks.
You should be seeing that very soon. This is launching right now.
Roshan, do you just want to show people, do a quick preview on where that's coming so they can see the user experience?
Sure. Maybe I don't know how much time I have, or what I can do is I can kind of like follow up with the specific notes regarding that one. Would that be fine?
Sure.
All right. Thanks, Bill. In terms of team access types, right? So we talked about how a team can be created. Broadly, there are two different kinds of teams that you can create, right? The default is what's called a private team. So what is meant by a private team is that the membership is kind of governed by owner approval, right? It's open for anybody to join, provided the owner approves it. This is typically the kind of teams that we see is used most of the time. Right. The other category of teams are what is called public teams. So public teams are basically open for anybody to join without approval required. So if you have, needs that, like, you need to have a team that is just for communicating out with everybody in your organization, or have topics or interest-based teams that cross boundaries, you can use a public team. And it's a great default for smaller organizations, right? You can just start off with a public team because it, fosters collaboration across the entire organization. So we have talked about teams, the origins and and how you can create teams, as well as what are the kind of teams that you can create. Let's now talk about channel types, right? So there's one channel that always gets created and associated with every single team, and that's called a general channel. It's also set as favorite by default. What a favorite means is that the channel always shows up in what we call in the teams list on the left hand side of your team. So general channel is always shown there by default. Favorite is the star that you see. Like you can take an action. Like if you have, let's say, have 10 channels in a team, a favorite action actually brings in that channel from the overflow or the more into the team list on the left hand side, so that it's always visible, always handy, easy to reach. A general channel is special in the sense that it is created by default, it is favorited by default, it cannot be hidden, and it cannot be renamed or deleted. It's also special in the sense that this is where the control messages are shown. So these are things like membership updates or channel create update, etc. This is a place where you can kind of like get a running list of let's say new members join the team, or if somebody creates a new channel, you'll get to see that in the general channel. The other thing that you can do with general channel is that you can kind of lock that down in a certain way so that only team owners can post messages here. So if you want to use one channel in a very special way so that it can be used kind of like for announcements or broadcast messages, you can use the general channel and can be guaranteed that it's always visible on the team list for all users. so that a new message that you post there will be shown as bold in the thing inviting users to accept, or you can click and see, or you can mark the message as important so that it shows a badge on the team list that you can all users can quickly get to. Every other channel that you create outside, once you have set up a team is what we call a regular channel. Channels are open to all team members because it fosters collaboration. You can create channels for general or special interest topics. Typically, we have seen that channels evolve over time, but it's a kind of like a best practice to kind of establish a set of guidelines for what kind of channels you create upfront, and then let the life cycle needs detect how it grows, whether organically or through planned life cycle stages based on, again, organizational needs. So we have talked about teams, we have talked about channels, and let's talk about various user types and roles that apply. The tenant admin is, of course, who manages the entire organizational tenant and has full control over the roles, permissions, directory, apps, etc. From an AD point of view, from an Office 365 groups point of view, from a Teams point of view, has permissions to control, what kind of capability should be enabled. For example, guest access in Teams, and we'll talk about guest shortly. So all of these are primarily controlled by the tenant admin, and then the remaining users can actually leverage that functionality. I've called out team creator and team owner separately because team creator is something that you can control independently. So users with permissions to create a group or a team, and these are synonymous right now in the directory. These are what I'm calling team owners. You can potentially constrain this to a subset of users. The admin can actually, set up a security group that have permissions to the users in that security group are the only ones who have permission to create a team. So this is a potential option if you want to kind of lock down team creation. A team owner has permissions to manage the membership and settings for the team. But there are various fine-grained settings that are available. For example, if you want to lock down who can create channels, the team owner can go ahead and do so, and we will talk about some best practices for team owners down the line. But in general, it's good to have at least 2 team owners or more, so that if somebody leaves the organization, for example, you don't leave the team orphaned. A team member is a participant in the team, can fully collaborate across all of the channels. And depending on what the team owner has set the permissions to, team members can create channels and manage other aspects of the team. A guest user is somebody who is external to the organization, but whom you can invite to your organization to collaborate in Teams or in other Office 365 workloads. We had a specific section on a session on guest access last week, so I highly encourage you to look at the video and the slides from that if you need more information about guests. But essentially, you can invite anybody with an email address to participate as a guest in Teams. So with that, we covered all of the the basic team creation, team types, channel creation, and user roles in Teams. So I'll pause for a bit here and see if there are any questions. Sorry, I have to switch the windows to see if there are any comments. Let me see if I have any questions. None so far. Okay, so with that, I'll move on to the team lifecycle portion of the talk. So to facilitate this conversation, I've kind of leveraged a framework that was developed, in the 1960s by Tuckman. So this is nothing to do with Microsoft Teams as a product, but it's more about the how small groups develop which was published in the Psychological Bulletin. So the way to think about it is that, generally all teams as they form have, different stages. So there is the forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. Adjourning is something like, we added to complete the life cycle. So I'll talk about each one of these stages and how it applies to a team that is formed. So the forming stage is talking all about, like how do you pick a team and identify its goals. Storming is, as the team, of once it's created, how do you build trust within the team? How can you get people to kind of collaborate more together? Encourage adoption of new practices, open collaboration mechanisms that, are distinct from maybe what they would have been used to before. Norming is, once everybody gets to see the value and figure out consistent patterns in terms of how they get used, what the various channels are for, what the various modalities are, how they want to use certain capabilities that exist, and develop core cultures around how they use the product. Performing is as people have, like really mastered the tools, and it becomes a great tool in their hands to kind of have full collaboration, and all of the capabilities that exist fosters productivity within the organization. And adjourning is, we kind of like acknowledge that teams have a life cycle depending on how the teams are structured, and that's the topic that we're going to talk about next. If you create teams based on projects have life cycles. So once the life cycle ends, what do you do with the team? How do you manage the information and the communication that happened within the team and move on to the next team or stage of your product or organization? So with that, let's talk about the first life cycle stage, which I call forming. So let's talk about the creating the team aspect of it. So before creating the team, it'll be good to ask yourself, what is the the purpose of this team? Who are the right set of people who should be a part of this team? We highly encourage, because Teams is a collaboration platform, in the new workflow, we highly encourage everybody to kind of bias towards openness. To have the team set up in such a way that discussions, communications, everything happens out in the open. You can, of course, there are like you can create lockdown teams as required, but in general, most of your teams it's encouraged that they are broader teams, less number of teams, that fosters open collaboration. You can create teams based on like anchor that to, let's say, business processes, org structure. You can create a team for marketing, another team for HR. You can create teams based on projects. You might have some special projects that you want to lock down membership to. You can create a private team with a lockdown membership for that. You can look at existing collaboration entities, like, for example, you might be using email and distribution lists or SharePoint sites and groups, Outlook groups. So you could use all of those as signals to figure out how exactly to structure teams for your organization, where to get started. The next decision you have to make is, what is the access mechanisms? We talked about private and public teams. So public team facilitates open collaboration. The teams are easy to find and join. No approval is required. Anybody can, join with a single click by themselves, self-subscribe to that team and access all of the collaboration capabilities within that. But if you do need to control access, you can set it up as a private team, and then the owners can approve all of the membership. From an ownership perspective, we briefly touched upon this, that we recommend at least 2 owners to ensure that that there is always continuity. That if you have a single owner, there is a potential that if that owner leaves the organization or gets reassigned, it's difficult to manage the membership and the team settings at that point. So once you create the team or go through the process of creating the team, decide on what type and visibility of the team is, who the owners are. You can go ahead and add members, like what we called out earlier, bias towards openness, and invite all users who need to be a part of the team. These can be internal users across the organization, or you can even invite external users who are guests, so they will get an invitation that they can use to they can click on the link and participate in the teams from then on. At this point, you should probably set up the team picture and add a description so that this is captured and it's very easy for users to visually disambiguate the team, especially if users participate in multiple teams, and they can use the description. If people are trying to find the team, they can use the description to understand what exactly the team is for. You can also set the member permissions at the stage in terms of how you want the team to be managed. You can set it in such a way that all users or members can manage channels, apps, tabs, connectors, etc., or you can lock that down so that owners can manage this capability. And one of the tips that I've called out here is that you could potentially set up general channel in very specific ways, so that if you want to create a team where you need a channel that is used specifically for communicating out specific topics only by the owners, you can lock down the general channel if so desired. So as a part of creating the team, the next step that you move to is setting up the channels. So similar to the way we talked about teams, it'll be good to understand state upfront what the goals for the channels are. You can set up channels for collaboration. You can choose to do it around projects, topics, disciplines. So depending on how you want to set up the team and the channel, you can decide that accordingly. A general channel is created by default. Highly encouraged to add one or more channels that are relevant for the team. You can let the channels grow organically as the team gets used more, and then you find that there are discussion topics that are outgrowing the existing channels. So the channel messages and the topics are where you want most of the actual communication to happen via the channel post and replies to that, and then the tabs within that. But then the channels can form a great grouping of projects, topics, disciplines, etc. that enables easy access to discovery as well as segregation of discussion topics. You're highly encouraged to seed the channel with messages, content, and apps so that people who come in, who receive the invitation or notification that they are added to the team, from the get-go, they have something to work with. You can put in a welcome message in the channel. You could upload all of the, let's say it was a project-based channel, so you could upload relevant documents to the files tab so that all of the documents are accessible to everybody in the team with the right set of permissions. You don't have to do anything special. As long as the document is uploaded to the files tab, it will be accessible to all of the members of the team. You can add more tabs. For example, you can pin an Office document. This does have to be uploaded to files first, but let's say you have a Word document or an Excel file that all of the people in the team need to access and collaborate on. You can add that as a tab so that it's accessible as a top-level surface element for everybody in the channel. You can, if you have a company website, you can, or a similar site or a SharePoint site, you can add that via URL or via any of the available tabs that can be added directly. Planner is a great example. Like if you want to manage tasks, you can actually add Planner as a tab so that again it's accessible. Along with, you get conversations and files by default, but then you will get conversations, files, Planner, Power BI, whatever you want to add for that specific channel. You can, in addition, you can add connectors that deliver content automatically. For example, let's say there is a project-based channel and it's a public-facing project, and you have Twitter as a connector that is added. It can, push in messages periodically based on what the triggers that you set up for the connectors are. Similar to setting up the description for the channel, you're encouraged to set a description for the team. You're encouraged to set up a description for the channel as well, so that participants know what the channel is meant for, and it can evolve along with the channel. You can use a description for more purposes in terms of, let's say you want to call out some guidelines. All of that can be set up in the description. One of the recent capabilities that we have launched is the ability to what we call auto favorite a channel. So if you look at the screenshot towards the top right, as you are creating a channel at the very bottom, you get this option saying automatically favorite this channel for the whole team. So what this allows you to do is, as a team owner, when you are creating that channel, if you check that box, that channel is favorited by default, which means that all members of that team will see that channel on the team list on the left side by default. So this is a great way to kind of promote important channels so that it doesn't, like, if you have a lot of channels, it's by design goes into a what we call an overflow under the more option. This is so that we make the team list manageable, but automatically favoriting this makes sure that a new channel that you create, and you can do this up to 10 channels can be automatically set to be automatically favorited. You can configure not just during team creation, you can configure this in the team settings page as well. So you can set up to 10 channels to be automatically favorited so that it shows up on the team list for all users. Was there a question?
There are two questions.
All right, I can go through the questions now. So let me actually. All right. So Sean's question was, can I apply a global policy to lock down, manage apps, tabs, and connectors instead of applying on a team-by-team basis? I am not familiar with such a policy. Bill, do you know if there is a global policy at a user level in terms of who can manage?
No, there's not. I don't know. I don't even know if that's coming with granular admin. I will ask and revert, but assume I'll have to reply in email.
Thanks, Bill. And the question from
James Anthony, could you respond to my question? When you ask for channel-based access, I assume you mean a private channel. Is your audio working? Do you need me to?
Or James, if you can just type into the chat window in terms of the clarification for the question that you asked.
I just unmuted you if you want to respond, James. Well, do you want to speak to private channels?
Sure. So I highly encourage everyone to actually submit, especially for feature requests, submit that through the user voice for Teams. So private channels is something that, is top of mind for a lot of our customers and users, and this is something that we are working on. I don't have anything further to share at this point, but it's definitely something that we want to enable for our users in the future. What we mean by private channels is essentially, I think, and that's very likely what James' question is, in terms of having membership not just governed at the team level, but having membership governed at the channel level, which is, and what specifically we mean by a private channel is a channel within a team that has a further scoped down membership compared to the team. So if the team has X members, private channel will have members that are a subset of the members of the team.
And then Grant Thor has a question about one set of apps. Do you see that last question? Oh, second to last now.
All right, we have one set of apps in our environment. New teams created have possible applications restricted to a specific list.
Sorry, guys, just pointing out that we do in our environment have applications restricted as a global policy. So that does seem to be available. The question before about teams having applications restricted, I think the team coordinator globally can restrict those.
That's great. Thanks, Tor. I think Sean's question was, I hear what you're saying. Yes, you're saying you can globally lock down apps to only the whitelisted apps.
Correct, yes.
Thank you. I misread that question, if that's what the question was.
Yeah, thanks, Tor. And there was a question from Julia. Is there a way to move channels from one team to the other? So Julia, currently no, and this is one of the user voice feedback requests that we have seen. So please do upvote that one so that we can kind of prioritize it amongst all of the requests that come in.
Sounds good. Is that the Microsoft voice?
It's Teams. There's a Microsoft
It's
Teams
Teams?
user voice,
Microsoft
and I can
Teams.
share the link after this.
Oh, thank you very much. I think I have already mentioned it and upvoted other people who mentioned it.
Great, thank you. All right, if there are no further questions, I'll move on to the next one. So one of the tips that I've called out at the bottom of this one is actually letting team members know to follow relevant channels. And what follow does is send them notifications about new posts, and you can again control what notifications you receive, like new posts, replies to posts, likes, etc. So you can actually, and email versus notifications or activity notifications within Teams. So you have fine-grained settings that the user can control, but letting members know to follow what are the most important and relevant channels in the team is a great way to kind of encourage them to stay updated about what is happening within the team, so that they can react quickly to questions or topics that come up, even if they are not specifically, for example, I've mentioned in the message. All right, so with that, we cover stage one, which is basically, creation of the team, the forming aspect of things. Let's talk about the next stage, which is next two stages, actually, the storming and the norming stage, right? So at this stage, you have already created the team, set up the basic framework and structure, and people have slowly started engaging with it. So this is the stage at which you want to kind of evolve and explore the team to encourage users to create and modify channels, discover how the collaboration product can be used, encourage them to explore, potentially, leading to dead ends as well. But without this exploration, it's hard to figure out what is the best collaboration mechanism that works for the specific team. You can experiment with, team and channel mentions, so that, what kind of messages should be elevated so that everybody gets notified, what channels should be favorited, who can post in general, should it be open to everyone, or should only owners be encouraged to post there? And it's a great way to let the usage guide the design, so that the team can actually evolve into a highly productive collaborative space. Settings are available, in case you need to lock down the team or manage it, or change what the defaults you started with are. So if you want to do more lockdown, if it's not working for you, you can do that as well. But starting with an initial open collaboration, might lead to highly encouraging results. The other aspect of things is to kind of build trust, tolerance, and a spirit of collaboration, right? This is actually interesting because Teams is a product that puts collaboration front and center, right? So you want to kind of have people discover for themselves how to communicate within it. You want to initiate and sustain, right? Initially, when users come in, especially if they are new to Teams, when they join a team that's already active, they might be hesitant to, let's say, post something, right? So encouraging them to actually post, being open about, sometimes people make mistakes in terms of, let's say, there are patterns that evolve in terms of what each team or channel is used for, or if they act, by mistake they try out at mentioning a channel or a team, etc. So you can create the spirit of collaboration that actually encourages people to try out stuff and be forgiving in some sense, and that will have long-term benefits or payoffs in terms of how actually the team grows. Teams supports both open conversations in channels, as well as if you want to have private one-on-one chats, right? So and both of these have good value. In general, the recommendation is to have as many of the conversations in channels as possible, because everybody can get to discover, contribute, compared to private or one-on-one chats, which creates islands. But those do serve a purpose. But in general, we encourage that, as much as possible, have the conversations out in the open in the channel so that everybody in the team gets to view and participate. Teams also comes with, great what we call fun features, stickers, Gifly, etc. So you should kind of like use this to both have the fun aspect to it as well as to develop a team personality. It's a great way to respond to certain communications in a more visual way as compared to typing in a long piece of text. So it's more expressive in that sense. And you can use this stage to kind of establish the right behaviors for the team and organization based on how it grows, how you see the patterns of usage, etc. I've shown a screenshot of the member permission settings that the team owner can control to decide at a team level, between owners and members, what they can do and what are the general permissions available for them. And then there are more settings which I've not included here. One tip I have called out here is to encourage users to upload and share files, and Ed mentioned others. So this uploading or sharing files in channels actually improves the visibility, gives everybody the permission to view the files, as well as when you have a file that's a part of the team and channel, it allows you to have conversations around that that everybody can contribute to. And Ed mentioning others actually is a great way to kind of have a call to attention for others in terms of let's say you're assigning a task list, or you're just taking meeting notes and have identified a list of follow-up action items that people need to take. This is again a great way to actually earmark, not just call out who needs to do it, but also ensure that they get a notification, and visually it's easy for them to identify and then below that and take a follow-up. So let's move on to the next stage, which is the performing stage. So at this stage, the team has kind of like grown and established a certain pattern for itself. What we have called out there is that the team is a living organism. It has started its life like with somebody creating it, and then it has slowly evolved over a period of time. But you need to nourish it in terms of, or all of the participants need to nourish it. You can designate some champions for the team and channel to actually, kind of like encourage usage. It could be the team owner, it could be somebody other than the team owner. This is kind of like a role anybody can pick up. The champions can kind of like, discover and propagate new behaviors. And from a team perspective, we can look at who the guest users are. If you need to manage them, there are different controls available in terms of how you manage them based on what your business needs are. You can ensure that the team ownership is up to date so that it doesn't end up in a stage where the team is orphaned. Channels should also evolve with the business needs. So as, let's say, if you have created project or topic-based channels, as they, as new projects or topics spin up, you can create new ones. As the old ones fade, you can allow them to kind of like fade out. You can, if the content in some of them are sensitive or are no longer relevant for the business needs, you can delete channels. And this is kind of like tied to the question that came up earlier. If there are specific areas that kind of emerge as a large group or a topic of discussion within a channel, or across channels, you can potentially carve out a new team or carve out a new channel, as the case might be, so that there is a new collaboration space and environment for that specific group or topic. You can use the owner favorited option to maintain a steady awareness baseline. So as the channel list evolves, you can decide which ones get prominence by kind of removing on a favorite for the ones that have that you want to fade away, and then setting new ones up as owner favorite, so that users kind of get to see a fresh, most relevant set on their team list. And you can try out different channel collaboration mechanisms now that users are familiar with a lot of these, the basic capabilities. You can try channel meetings, tab conversations around documents, especially if some of these have, if the team is being actively used, but certain capabilities are not being used. The champions can kind of encourage some of this, and once users pick that up, then you can let that grow on its own. You might need to do some level of what we call renorming if the team starts failing, or doesn't really take off, or gets into a rut. So one behavioral pattern that we can see is generally between emails and teams, like depending on a little bit of back and forth around which one gets used. Of course, the communication in teams, like especially with the right set of people, is open. You can collaborate. The messages are easier to manage. The threaded conversations within that, the files have the right permissions. So you could potentially kind of drive more communications into teams. One interesting way to do that is, like, let's say if there are important emails that people need to go back and refer to, you can actually there's a way to get a link to a channel, get an email address for the channel, and you can just forward that email to the channel so that it gets posted as a message within the channel. So sometimes when there is an announcement that comes up from either within the group or outside of the group that lands in email, you can kind of like bring that back into Teams by forwarding it into the Teams email address. You can encourage the usage of mobile and other apps for driving up engagements. And go ahead and prune channels if necessary. There are channels that are, not actively being used. You can, kind of like delete them or just age them out. You also have the capability, as I've called out in the tip, to kind of share links to channels and posts. So you can get a link to a specific post. You can get a link to a specific channel and share that out with others, either through Teams or through email or any of the other communication modalities that you have available. So with that, we move on to the last and the final stage of the lifecycle examples. So this is when, like when the team has kind of run its course, right? Like, so you can, have a workflow around how do you officially wrap this up, like in terms of what is the formal closure for this, identifying when the team has run its course, letting everybody know that, okay, this has reached a stage where it has outlived its usefulness, and where the next set of collaboration or projects or what needs to happen. And you can use existing, normal project closure rituals, like, like if there's postmortems, if it is a project specific thing, if it is summaries, you can use all of the patterns to do the right processes. This applies to both a channel and more so to a team. There's a capability that is coming in future where you can archive a team that has outlived its purpose. So what this does is, this allows you to retain the content. So if this is a team that you do not want to delete, there is content there are channel conversations there, you can actually retain the content while moving the team out of users' daily routine. So they can still access it, but it is not actively being used. And if the team, if you believe the content is no longer needed, you can actually go ahead and delete the team. This especially applies to test teams or things that you have created initially to play around with, or if there are sensitive content that you do not want to be lying around. So the initial delete is actually a soft delete. So you have a 30-day grace period where the IT admin can actually go ahead and bring back the team if required. You can also set expiry policies. The admin can set expiry policies to reduce exposure. So these can be set to, for example, the owner has to renew the team if within a certain time frame. If not, the team will be automatically deleted. All right, so with that, we have covered all of the life cycle stages for the team. Let me quickly switch back and see if there were any questions that came in. I believe I talked about Julia's question. Yes, going back to James' question. Okay, so James, I think James had two questions. One is, I think, talking about private channels, which we covered. The other scenario I think James is asking about is also, I think, guests who have access only to specific channels. James, correct me if I'm wrong. I think your second bullet point is talking about scoping the access for guests, not to a team, but to specific channels. This is also something that we are looking at. Please, there's a user voice item that actually covers these kind of channel scenarios. Please do provide your feedback over there, and definitely something that we are looking into based on the feedback that we have received around this. Question from Mark: can we archive channels and not delete? Archiving channels is not a capability that is supported today, something that we have received feedback for. There is, again, a user voice topic around this, so please do upvote that one so that we can reflect that prioritization in our planning process. Question from Matt. Yes, so the question was, does deleted channels count against Teams 200 channel limit? Yes, still they are hard deleted. Deleted channels do count towards the overall 200 channel limit. Question from Jessica: do you have any recommendations or best practices for? Oh, sorry. Let me go back. Do you have any recommendations or best practices for creating a new team versus a new channel within a team, assuming permissions could be the same? Jessica, technically there's no hard and fast answer to this. In general, we highly encourage less number of teams to avoid team proliferation and confusion with respect to users being in multiple teams and trying to figure out what each teams are for. So if the channel can serve the purpose, you have the right team with the right set of membership, everything, because what the team allows you to do is all the people in the team get to collaborate if they so. They have visibility into the content, they have visibility into the discussions, etc. If I may take an example, right? Let's say you create a team for your entire organization, and then there are channels for, let's say, the design organization, one channel for the support organization, one other channel for the product organization. So structuring it this way allows, let's say, the support organization to go, if you want it to be that way, you know, they don't need to actively participate in the product organization, but they have access to it, right? So if there is a discussion happening around, oh, do we need to take the product in this direction versus that direction, support can, you know, weigh in and say that, you know what, this is something that we have heard through from a lot of our customers, right? So they can actually go ahead and do that. So that's one way to think about it in terms of actually having less number of teams with channels within that. And then the counterbalance to that is, like, you know, if you need to have teams that are either needs to be locked down or scoped to specific projects for other reason, or if you want to, if your number of channels or number of members hit their limits, right, then you can think about actually spinning off a different team with its own set of channels. Hope that helps. Eileen had a question on, or a request to demo the forward of emails. Let me actually see, I think we are down to 9 minutes, so let me see if I can quickly demo this one plus the other one that Bill had requested earlier. Question from Dave: is there a way to search specific parts of a channel? For example, we have a wiki page in one of our channels, but the search doesn't work on that page. Got it. Okay, so I'm honestly not sure about the search revealing wiki side of things. I don't know if Bill knows whether wiki is covered, but you can, like, as you search, you can actually filter the search results, but I'm not sure if wiki is actually covered as a part of the search.
It is not covered, but that's a roadmap item. I don't have a expectation though on when that might come, but it's something we're working on.
Great, thanks, Bill. And Dave, please do either start a new. I'm sure there should be a user voice post on this. Please do upvote that one as well. For Julia as well, for because she agrees with Dave, so please do. James, what was the question you had? What was your question with reference to the restricting guests to a specific channel? That is something that we have received feedback for and we are considering, but that's not supported currently. So both private channels and the ability for members of a channel that is who are not members of a team is something that we have heard from users and we are considering. All right, so 7 minutes. So let me quickly go through a couple of examples and resources that you have available to read up more on this, and I'll see if I can actually demo stuff quickly as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Roshan.
All right. So this is just an example of how you could set up teams and channels. Let's say your Contoso organization. So you've seen you can see here different kinds of teams that are set up. One is for a product launch. HR has its own team. Marketing has its own team. There is a team on a topic for modern project management. IT has different teams, one for service incidents and collaboration services, and you can see the channels that example channels within that. Just to kind of drive home the point, this is kind of like a potential example of what the product launch team could and the channels within that could look like. What you could use the journal channel for. Design channels, documentation, engineering, go-to-market, production, etc. I will not read through each one of them, but happy to answer any questions if they come up or follow up offline. And I'll finish the session by quickly talking about a few resources that are available where you can read up more about this. The first one is the team's documentation and practical guidance. I've included the link at the bottom, so you can reach that via the short URL I mentioned over there. So if you go to the getting started, and there are sections on all the teams aspects, but there's a specific ones on teams and channels. So you can actually go there and look at guidance and practices for teams and channels. There are also other a lot of other content that you can leverage here, like moving from Skype for Business to Teams, etc. The other asset you can leverage is the Fast Track service, which is accessible through fasttrack.microsoft.com. Again, if you go through the content that is available there, there is content that you can actually use to promote and encourage teams use email templates, posters that you can print and keep, and there are also specific guides. Like if you see here in the launch support material, you can download them all through the links available there. So these are things like, how can an engineering organization set up teams? What are some practices that team leaders can follow, get started and onboard new users, etc. So there's a topic-based, organization-based, role-based guides that are available. So with that, I come to the end of the set of presentations, and let me see if I can quickly demo the two questions that came up. So I'm going to stop my screen sharing for a minute there and quickly switch back to Teams. Please let me know if there are any questions in the meantime while I bring this up.
There was a question about demoing the forwarding of email to a channel. I don't know if you picked that one up, Roshan, if that's one of the ones you're going to demo, but that would be easy to demo.
Yes, that's the one that I'm going to demo first. Let me actually pull that up. Sorry, I wasn't prepared for a demo. That's why it's taking me a little bit of time to pull up the.
Would you prefer I stop recording?
Yes, please. That would be great.